As I've mentioned in earlier videos, I'm going to be installing this little power bar in the Bugeye. So it's got a 12-volt outlet in the middle. It's got a couple of USB ports here along with a little digital voltmeter, and then an on-off switch for the whole panel. Now I also thought, why don't I try and incorporate a couple of auxiliary gauges. I have an amp gauge here. I'm not sure if it works yet. Perhaps another auxiliary gauge here or a small clock. Now the area of the car I was hoping to install those in is down against the back here, or the front of the tunnel here. And after some thought, decided to look at what I could use for boxes to put those in. And I've checked on Amazon, and there's a couple of, I came up with 3 different sizes of what they call project boxes. And I'm going to try and I'm going to duplicate those out of some cardboard here, do some CAD, some cardboard aided design, and see which boxes fit best. I'm just going to use this one for the larger size, for the middle size. I'm going to cut the backs off. So as I said, this one is 3.5 or 3.4 inches. So essentially that's the right depth for that particular box. I'm just going to cut these back bits off here. Cut that one off. And then I am going to cut a hole in here. I'll mark that on there first. Then we need a spot to put this in. And I can see already that I think this is just going to look too big, but and again, this is just a real rough mock-up of how this would go in the car. And about there and there. And one of the things I wanted to do with this, particularly with this power panel, is to have it accessible but inobtrusive. So hopefully this little project will achieve that. Yeah, let's see if we can get that to slide in there. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the harness off the back. There we go. So that would go in thereabouts. So that's that part. This is an old Stuart Warner amp gauge. It only goes up to 30 amps. I think what I'd like to do is get one that goes up to 50. And again, this is just kind of proof of concept. Let's take a bit more out of here. I've got a couple of other extra gauges in here. So that gives me the rough idea with that kind of mid-size box. So I'm going to run over to the car and see how it looks in there. Now what I was thinking of, as mentioned earlier, is putting it up against the panel at the back here. So I think that is going to be a little too big sitting in there. So let's try the smaller size box and see how that works out. Okay, so this is the 230 by 150 by 85 box. I'm not going to even try doing the larger one. So I'll make a template for this 200 by 120 by 75 and see how that turns out. Okay, now I've got the smaller box set up. Let's go see how that looks in the car. Okay, I think that is going to look a lot better. So from when you're sitting up in the driver's seat, you can't really notice the power outlets, but you can see the gauges, and they're still easily accessible. So now I can go and order that box and get around to installing it in the car. Okay, so here's the box that I ordered from Amazon. It was the smaller of the three options that I had picked out, and I did with my cardboard aided template here. So I'm just going to undo the screws, which I think they stand out quite a bit. So I'm going to paint those black because the gauges and what have you are going to go into this front panel. So I don't know where that came from. Take these screws out. Now this is marketed as a weatherproof, dustproof enclosure, which is not critical for this application. But that lid comes off, and it comes with a gasket that will go in this groove around the perimeter that I'll put in just because it's there. I'll just set that aside because I don't need it. Now the idea is to have the gauges and the outlets and the switch mounted in this front panel. This back panel here will be permanently mounted to the front bulkhead of the car, but I'll get around to that a bit later. But for now, I'm going to get the front of the box set up to receive the three items from this panel here. Initially I was going to try and install this entire panel into the box, but I think what I'm going to start out by doing is just drilling 3 holes for each of these 3 outlets, the switch, the 12-volt outlet, and the USB outlet. Then I'll do the holes for the gauges as well. So first thing I'm going to do is just tape up the front. Now what I will do with these 3 here is I will center them in the panel this way, and I will do the spacing exactly as it is in this panel, so that if I want to use the panel going forward, I can still get this whole thing in the right spot. So I'm going to take these out of the panel, and they're just a screw-on fit here. Take those off. Now I picked this panel up off Amazon, as I did with the box, so I'll put links to both of those products in the description below, so that if you're interested, you can go and pick those up. So my idea now is I can get these holes in exactly the right spot and centered side to side, and then I can mark my holes for the gauges underneath that and go from there. So I just used whatever size hole saw this was. It just happened to be the right size for this. So I just used that just slowly, and I've got my holes cut for the 12-volt power outlet, the USB outlets, and the switch for those two will go in right there. And the more I look at this, the more I think I am not going to need this panel at all. I can throw it on there just to see what it looks like, but then I'd have to deal with the screw holes, and then we'd end up with something like that. And I don't think that's going to look as clean, but we'll see. I can even do that without drilling any more holes other than for the screws here. Anyway, I'll give that some thought. Okay, I have my very old school hole saw set up with a 2-inch bit on it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill a pilot hole in the center for each of these spots, and then we'll use the actual hole saw. All right, so that's the centers marked. What I might do is put in, it turns out that this drill bit is actually bent, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that one out and put in a new one. Okay, I have a new straight drill bit in there. Yeah, that one was quite bent. Now, let's give this a... I'm just going to go very carefully. Okay, that kind of grabbed a little bit, but I think we're okay. Let's see if my gauge fits in there. And I might have to do a bit of cleanup around the side of that hole. So I'd rather the hole be a little bit small than a little bit big. So I can always make it bigger. So now I'm going to just spend some time filing those out and get the gauges to fit in there. All right, I've got the box with the holes cut, and all my gear goes in. So there's the 12-volt outlet, the USB outlet, switch, There's one gauge. And then there's the other one. And again, these are just for proof of concept. I'm not necessarily going to be using these gauges. Of course, obviously, I've already got a fuel gauge. The plan is to get gauges that are very similar. And I may even try to get ones that have a black bezel on them as opposed to chrome, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to pull the tape off. Well, there we go. I got the gauges in and the outlets and switch secured. So let's go try it out in the car. So here we go. My little box, which will go up about there. So from there I can see the gauges okay, and yet the outlets themselves are inobtrusive and don't stick out like a sore thumb. I'm quite happy with how that's turned out. So now that I have that part figured out, the next thing is to figure out how I'm going to mount that to the bulkhead. But that's all I have time for this video. Thanks for joining me. Next time, I'll get the panel installed in the car. I'll have decided what gauges I'm going to put in, and then hopefully we'll be able to get the gauges themselves installed and wired up and ready to go. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to share it with your friends. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon. Click on that, you'll get notified when the next video comes out. If you'd like to see where this whole project started, I'll put a link to that video up in the top corner. And if you want to catch up on the previous video, I'll put a link to that one just down below here. My name is Ian. This is the Econobox Garage. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.